Welcome to Voice of Supply Chain, brought to you by ISM New Jersey and SourceDay. The purpose of our show is to tell stories of people in procurement and supply chain doing extraordinary things. I am your host, Sarah Scudder. I oversee marketing for SourceDay. We automate purchase order changes and enable supplier collaboration for manufacturers, distributors, consumer packaged good brands, and retailers. If you want to talk more about women in ERP or what's happening in the world of manufacturing, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and follow my hashtags Women in ERP and Manufacturing Maven. Today, our guest is Jashawn. Him and I have known each other, I want to say for a few years now.
Yeah.
And he's actually in a very different part of supply chain than me. I am now 100% in the direct world, and Jashawn is on the indirect side. So, Jashawn, I want to dive in and kind of go way back in time and talk a little bit about some childhood memories.
Oh my goodness. Sarah, I am not getting on your couch today. I am not getting on your couch. You're not going to have me crying by the end of this episode.
So, share with me your favorite childhood memory.
Completely random, but this is what comes to mind immediately. Literally laying on my mother's lap. That's my favorite childhood memory. And so I realized that my personality and my influence skills kicked in really early, because I knew when she got on the phone with her girlfriends, that was the perfect time that she was not going to pay attention and she was going to rub my head. So that's literally my favorite childhood memory. Is that business related?
This is down and dirty personal, Jashawn.
All right, that'll work.
What in your childhood shaped you to be the person that you are today?
Speaking of my mother, I grew up in the inner city of Detroit, right? And so we didn't have a lot of money, the things that I get access to today. That was even a thought when I was growing up. And I remember oftentimes we would get bill collectors that would call the house. And they would say, hey, such and such is due, yada, yada, yada. And the way I watched my mother, who was very gentle, I just mentioned she's, laying on her lap and her rubbing my head. Very gentle woman. She's probably 5'3" at best on a good day, maybe 5'4" with heels, however that works out. But I watched another side of her come out, and she influenced and negotiated for life in those situations. And that always stuck with me. It always stuck with me. And now I find myself, influencing and negotiating big deals. And it comes from that foundation that she set very early on.
What's a tradition that you learned from your family that you've continued on today?
So my father is extremely hardworking. He put in 35 years in automotive, manufacturing, production, and I think for a large period of that time, he was getting up at 4:30 a.m. to get to the job, and I thought, man, that's extremely hardworking. The dedication, the consistency. And so my mother is hardworking as well. But the other thing that my mother brings is that she loves to dance. My mother loves to dance. If there's music and there's a dance floor, she's probably dancing. And so I think what I've been able to do is put both of those together. Is how do you do what you do well, but have fun while you're doing it? And so that's probably one thing that has resonated with me. And it's like, never do I want to be the person that's just talking, yeah. And I want to make sure that we're having fun. We'll get to the facts. We'll stay focused on the details and attention to nuance. But at the same time, let's do it while we're entertaining ourselves and having fun and dancing. Now, speaking of dancing, the Wheat Bank conference, oh man, there's dancing every 5 minutes. That's my type of conference, my type of business. All right, plug out for Wheat Bank, right?
What type of dance?
Oh man. So all different types. I just learned, for me personally, I just learned salsa merengue maybe 3 years ago. So I think I'm getting better at it a little bit. But my mother, she knows how to do, if there's 15 types of hustle, my mother knows how to do 21 types of hustle. I have no idea where she made up the extra six, but she is rocking out there. And at some point, she has to teach me how to hustle.
So is one of the dancing shows in the future for your mom?
You know, maybe I'll become a star so she can dance with a star.
So Jishan, you also mentioned that one of the things you learned from your childhood is to have fun, something that you learned from your mom. When you and I were chatting, I think it was at ISM this year, you mentioned something that really stuck with me. And it was the fact that you take one night a week off
Yeah.
to do something fun. So talk a little bit about that.
So I've learned, this is man. I was in a paper and packaging industry. This is maybe 2006, some time ago, and I was just traveling, doing all these different things, in one facility to the next facility, and I knew that it is important for me to have quality of life. And so I flew into Houston, and you drive about an hour, 15 minutes east, get into Beaumont, and then our facility was in Evadale. And so I said, look, I'm going to fly in the day before. Whenever I do these trips, they're very tiring. I'm going to fly in the day before, and I'm going to find just an amazing place for dinner. Every now and then that I haven't tasted. So if it's a different cuisine, if it's Thai, if it's whatever it is, I want to taste it. And then also just relaxation. And so I'm gonna try every type of massage that there is. And I would do that and then go into Beaumont and have an amazing day of meetings the next day. So I started thinking, why can't I do this across the world? And that's what I started doing. So I find these little hidden pockets of quality of life across the world. And whenever I travel there for work, I make sure I add an extra day to be able to enjoy just quality of life. Yeah, you have a great memory.
It's something that I'm not very good at, and when you said that to me, it really stuck out.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up with all women. My two older sisters and my single mother and all of their friends. And one of the things that I love about women is that women are going to collaborate within the first 5 minutes, and they're going to know where your son gets his haircut. They're going to know the last vacation that you took, and it's like 5 minutes into the conversation. And I realized that it's extremely important to have that release. Whether you're doing it with your girlfriends or you're doing it for yourself, self-care is extremely important, especially how busy we are as professionals.
What's one thing that you learned as an adult that you wish you knew as a kid?
Um, oh, that's a good question. One thing I learned as an adult that I wish I knew as a kid. It honestly has to be relationships. Like, if I would have known the strength of relationships when I was a kid, I would have started developing them much earlier in life. And you do as a kid, but you don't think that I could see you again someday. Right? If you have a friend in middle school that's a really good friend, you don't think, let me get your number or somehow stay in contact, especially in the day when I went to middle school, there was no Facebook. Right. So that kind of dates me a little bit. And I look at the fact that relationships are global currency. When the pandemic happened, I was in private practice, and one of the things that I'd done up until the point before the pandemic is travel the world and train folks on procurement, supply chain, contract negotiations, et cetera. Right, and so Southeast Asia, Middle East, Europe. When the pandemic happened, a lot of our corporate clients couldn't get access to PPE, and so I was able to pick up the phone and call one of my students from last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago and say, hey, I know you lead up the largest pharmacy network in Saudi Arabia. What are you guys doing for nitrile gloves? And so relationships are definitely access to, it is global currency, honestly. And if you can convert that relationship into financial success, then you think you're doing well in life.
So why'd you choose to go to college?
I don't think anyone has ever asked me that question, Sarah. It was just assumed, and uh, well, for me, I can't say in my neighborhood. You know, a lot folks in my neighborhood didn't make it out of my neighborhood, but it was assumed for me that this is actually I do know the answer to that question, Sarah. It was about money for me. I looked at the facts and I was like, okay, graduate high school, make maybe back then minimum wage was $7.50. Maybe it might have been less than that. Or go to college and have a chance of making $45,000 a year. Done. You didn't have to convince me. There was no other calculation. That was it. And then the stuff I learned as a byproduct along that journey was amazing. But it came down to 750 versus 40,000 a year. That's the decision.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting about your background is you actually chose to major in supply chain. It's not something that you just fell into. So why the major in supply chain?
So I went to Michigan State, go green, and I had to work to pay, for the things that I wanted in life, and so I had an apartment, and I wanted nicer food. I wasn't spoiled, but I worked hard and I like to have fun, and so I worked at two men in a truck, and so if you can imagine a moving company moving very heavy furniture in Michigan, where it actually did snow back then. So nowadays, with global warming, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Maybe it's going to snow, maybe it doesn't. But it actually did snow, and it was 3 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches. But you know what? If somebody is moving and have to be out of their house today, they're not rescheduling their move. And so we carry heavy furniture in the snow. And I learned, went back to the office, and my manager used to schedule us and say, Williams, Scudder, Thompson, you're up at 8 o'clock, and Scott, blah 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 blah, you're up at 12. And it was like clockwork. We would go out on our first job, and the first team would get back at 11:45, 11:50. I was like, man, how are you doing this? Like, this is pretty amazing that you've scheduled this thing all out. And he's like, oh, I'm taking logistics and production classes at Michigan State. And I was like, wait, the same Michigan State that I go to? And so I went to see my advisor the next day. And my advisor said, yeah, it's logistics and it's material handling, it's production scheduling, and it gets into purchasing and negotiations. And I was like, wait. And I remember my mother negotiating with all those bill collectors. And I was like, so I am in. Whatever this thing is, sign me up. I had no idea, Sarah. I had no idea how it would change my life. I just thought this would be fun to do. And I want a job when I graduate that's fun, and not just me sitting at a desk. And that's the reason why I signed up for it.
What's the most important thing you learned in college?
The most important thing that I learned in college. Oh, geez. I almost remembered the name. My accounting 202, Dr. Petroni or something like that. I had a paper that was due. It was due at 2 o'clock or something like that. And I finished the paper at 1:45.
No comment here.
As you are aware, I'm going to show up, but I'll be there 4 minutes in advance, maybe not 15 minutes. So I'm like really pushing it to and so I got lost getting to her office. She told me I can drop it off in her office. And so I got to her office at 2:02, and she said, I'm not accepting the paper. I was like, wow, this. I didn't expect this. She said, you're supposed to turn in about 2 o'clock, and you're not here at 2 o'clock. And she didn't accept the paper. Luckily, I was able to do other things to get a 3.5. But that I could have had a 4 point, I think, if I would have gotten there on time. But what that taught me was there's some relationships that expect the worst, and there's some relationships that expect the best. And you have to figure that out very quickly. And expecting the worst is not always a bad thing. If someone says, look, I know who you are, I know how you roll, I expect that from you, and feel free to impress me. That's one way of looking at a relationship. And the other side is, I don't care how you roll. This is what I look for. Feel free to meet where I am. I think that's important in the office. It's important with your leadership team. That's important in friendships. It's important with our suppliers. We got to know how people are wired and what they expect in order to really maximize that relationship that you have with that person. So I learned that the hard way. I learned the other side of that, right? The other side of some people are just wired a certain type of way, and you have to be able to work with all types of people.
So you survived college.
Barely.
You made it. What did you think you wanted to do after graduation?
I am literally doing what I thought I wanted to do. And I really, have been thinking about that for years. It's almost sad because if I wasn't able to do this, I don't know what I would have done. I had no backup plan. This was it. And what is this? I don't really see myself as a procurement leader or a supply chain leader. I just see myself as a businessman. And I look at economic development. I look at workforce development. I look at the global economy. I'm looking at the supply chain impact on business and profitability. That's what I am first. And what happens is you find yourself in some very interesting conversations once you accept the fact that that's who you are. And so I could, what I saw myself doing in college, after college, I didn't put a name to it, but it is this. It's gallivanting across the world, finding business deals that make sense for me and my family. And then everything else after that is secondary. The fact that I do it for floor and decor, okay, that's fine. The private portfolio that I have of small businesses, all of that is secondary to the fact that I know that business is my space. I enjoy business. I enjoy the heat of negotiations and influence. I enjoy the contracting piece and process mapping. And then what I actually use it on, that's secondary.
How did you get your first paying gig after college?
My first paying gig after college. All right, so that's a good question. During college, I I interviewed with Intel, and I turned them down. And Intel was like, "Wait, no one turns us down." It's like the mafia. Like no one turns us down. And I turned them down. And the reason why I turned them down is because I was graduating college in 3.5 years. I took AP classes in high school. I came in and got straight to it. And I was like, since we hanging out here for 5 years, how fast can I get done? And I saw a path to get done in 3.5 years instead of 4. And as I got closer to that time, I realized that, I don't want to come out in the December market because the May market is much better. And so I turned Intel down and I went after a 6-month co-op instead of a 3-month. Yeah, this is a 19-year-old making these decisions, right? Unheard of for me, right? And I think that 6-month co-op was so critical. So critical. So my point is, I met a gentleman during that 6-month co-op, and he really shaped my career. But before I got into working for him and getting promoted and doing different things over the course of my career, I went back to Intel. I called them up and said, "Hey, remember when I turned you down? What do you guys got going on full time?" And I said, "Man, I'm so glad you called us." And so instead of actually interviewing for a job at the career fair in my senior year, I hung out with Intel in their booth, interviewing other students for them to get a job. And it was needless to say, Don Moore, literally remember her name from 22 years ago. Don Moore was like, "You're already hired. This is just a formality." And so that was my first paying gig out of college, was going to work for Intel and sourcing parts for the litho and track processes.
So you said you did a 6-month stint at a co-op. What does that mean?
Oh, that's a good question. And so one of the biggest things that you can do as a student is to find a way to get into your craft, get a preview of what you're getting into to see if you really like it. And so the internship, everyone kind of is familiar with that term. The internship is a 3-month window in most situations. During the summer, you can jump into that company and get a feel for what your job could look like, and you can meet folks in the industry. The co-op, for me, and by nature of definition, lasted for an entire semester. And so I actually spent time away from the campus for an entire semester at that company and was embedded. And so an internship, you can only do so many things in 2.5 months. The co-op, you're there for 6 months. And so I literally was a buyer in my junior year of college. I was a buyer for a chemical company and got a good feel for what that looked like. And it was like, I don't want to be a buyer ever again, but I did it and it was fun. And I learned how to be better than a buyer when I graduated.
What did you learn at Intel?
Man, these are good questions. I need like a list of these questions in advance. I'm joking. What I learned at Intel, Intel was really big on faster, better, cheaper. And it was that simple. Andy Grove, the president and CEO of Intel at the time when I was there, just really did a great job of shaping in simplistic fashion. Oh man, I still struggle with this today. I'm gonna be honest. How do you simplify what you do to the point where anyone can understand what you do in 7 seconds? And Andy Grove was a master of that. He said, "Look, guys, our vision is very simple. We're gonna be faster, better, cheaper." It's like, oh, that actually 7 seconds. I get it. And that's exactly what we did. And so not only did I learn kind of that articulation, but also learn how do you do that. And we had a program called Copy Exact, where you'll take an entire production operation, copy it, and drop it exactly into another city, another state, another fabricating facility. And you give yourself the ability to be flexible and make different things at different places at different times. And I kind of copied and exact my career. I look at a moment where I've done, let's say, the top of the mattress is a filler cloth. And that filler cloth, the entire job of that filler cloth is coefficient of friction, and it prevents the mattress from sliding off. But then I went to another industry and we talked about these huge paper rolls that was on the back of trucks, and we wanted to lock those paper rolls in place. And I said, well, look, you can probably use the same material, non-woven material with a chemical base, to actually sit on the floor to give you coefficient of friction. And so I think it's the ability to copy exact in different worlds. I love it when I do it internationally, right? Take something that they haven't seen, a concept that they haven't seen, and be able to bring something from a different country into that environment. You know, that's business development. That's business to me, and that's what I learned from Intel, Andy Grove.
Why did you leave Intel?
Oh man, I'm not getting on your couch, Sarah. I'm not gonna get on your couch. You're not gonna make me cry. I'm not gonna go to sleep for the rest of the day because I'm too tired to face life anymore. Why did I leave Intel? I knew, and this is kind of how I felt about Detroit, to be honest with you. I will always love Detroit. I will always love Intel. They were foundations for me. I am from Detroit. I rep Detroit. Intel gave me a foundation. It was my first, I am an adult and I got to make decisions. By the way, I remember the first year at Intel, I was like, wait, you got to take vacation for spring break? All right, so I learned those things, right, in that role at Intel, and in life. I learned how to be a man for those 3.5 years. But I left because I knew that my life was bigger than Intel. I knew that, the 28 buyers that was in my group, I knew that half of them probably were good where they were. They were happy in that role doing what they were doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just knew that I needed to grow and I needed to be better. But I waited long enough to get a foundation, and I think I made the right move. And so my mentor, Tony Milliken, lifelong mentor, amazing guy. I did the co-op with Tony, and I happened to be talking to him one day, and next thing I know, I got a phone call about taking another opportunity outside of Intel. So that's how it happened, going back to relationships.
So what did you do next?
I went to the mattress industry, and you were talking about indirect, direct earlier. And so my career has been back and forth between indirect and direct. And so I was indirect, obviously, at Intel. When I went to the mattress industry, I went to direct. And I'm 24, 25, and had no idea that I would be traveling the world sourcing products and negotiating deals. And I'm in Switzerland one day, and I'm sourcing fibers, working with a group of suppliers at a large conference. And I'm just like, is this real? This is no way this can be real, that a black man from the inner city of Detroit, where 60% of people don't make it out of that neighborhood, probably 90% haven't been farther than 2 hours away in their life. And unfortunately, some of us that were farther than 2 hours away was probably visiting one of our relatives in prison. And so that black boy is actually traveling the world negotiating multi-million-dollar deals at 24. Yeah. And so I got lost in my thoughts, man. But that's kind of what I did when I left Intel, and it really changed my life.
So I asked you to share some fun facts, which I shared out before the show.
Okay.
And one of them is a tie-in to your family and the mattress and furniture industry.
Okay.
Super crazy. So tell me about your family's connection with making furniture, because this is wild to me.
I had no idea, but when I was growing up and before I was growing up, I got wind that my grandmother and my grandfather on my father's side, who were sharecroppers. And so a sharecropper is someone that you don't own the land, but you manage the land, you plow the land, kind of like a property manager, right? And you harvest the cotton, etc. They also were into in the mattress space and the furniture space. And I think my grandmother made mattresses, and it would be 20 something years later that I find this out, because I happened to go work for one of the largest mattress manufacturers in the world. I'm like, wait, what? This must be in the bloodline. There's something about mattresses that's in the blood. And so, yeah, that was kind of surreal to me. It was definitely surreal to me to learn that and to be in that space, and to think, you did it as a sharecropper on the farm, and now I'm doing it across the world. And that's just 2 generations. Where could we be 2 more generations from now? And so anyway, that's pretty cool.
So walk me through the progression of your career. You left Intel, you pivoted and went and worked at a mattress factory or a mattress manufacturer. What next?
Yeah, I did that, and this. You sure you want to do this? Because it's going to be like 7 stops, 8 different states.
I'll let you pick and choose.
No,
pull out the highlights for us.
There's actually a huge highlight, and so I went to the mattress industry, and I think I went to paper and packaging after that. I think I went to paper and packaging. Then I went to pharmaceutical, and that was the big break for me as pharmaceutical. I got a phone call, and it was the opportunity for me to break the manager level, and then hit the director level. And that was huge for me, because I knew I wanted to be a leader in a procurement space. And I was just waiting for the right opportunity. And so I went from senior manager to director in the pharmaceutical space. But a few years into that role, we had transformed our integrated facilities model. We didn't even have an integrated facilities model before that. And so that's what they brought me there for.
What does that mean?
So, when you look at global facilities, there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen in order for you to run that operation. Every plant or manufacturing facility is like its own little city. And so how do you manage that city, whether it's the electrical components, whether it's plumbing, how do we generate steam for electricity, and get it to the cafeteria services, the landscaping, everything that you need to say, yeah, everyone can do their job. Right, the IT help desk, except so if you need something to do your job, if you want to walk up to beautiful landscaping, that all fell under facilities. And so what we did was, instead of working with 200 contractors, we integrated that over each one of our campuses under one or two main providers. And so that was a huge undertaking for us. And so I learned a lot. The largest contract I've ever written in my career is $875 million or something like that. Right. And 24 sites in 8 different countries. Loved it. Traveled the world again. But my mother got sick and my nephew got shot and killed. And I decided it's time for me to take a leave of absence, focus on family, and just, that's what my focus was at that time. Well, what I didn't know was a friend was going to call me up and ask me to help her start a chiropractic practice. And then later she would say, hey, can you help my sister do this? And then later and then boom, voila, I'm now helping 16 small businesses do finance and supply chain. I never even thought of that as a career opportunity. But as I said earlier, I'm just a businessman and everything else comes after that. And there was no difference to me in helping a Fortune 1000 company versus a small business. So I went into private practice and did that for 8 years, man. Had a ball, training, development, small business, economic development, workforce development across the world. And then I got a call from one of my mentors, and he said, hey, Chuck Kinnebrew at Floor and Decor. He said, hey, I'm not going to be here for long. I'm getting ready to retire. I need somebody to replace me, and you're the type of guy that I need. and I was like, no, I'm not interested. And so a friend of mine over at Home Depot called me up and was like, did you tell me you weren't interested? Maybe you want to reconsider that. I was like, maybe you're right. And so that's how I got to where I am. Now I lead up all indirect procurement for Floor and Decor, including our supplier diversity initiatives.
Why indirect? You've pivoted back and forth.
For me, I think it's about variety. And it's very easy to get pigeonholed into a chemical buyer. It's very easy to be a raw material buyer, right? And you get this extreme focus on this one commodity or category. If you're in the automobile industry, steel, right? It's hard to go from steel buyer to plastics buyer. All right, it's not impossible, but it's harder. And so, you don't go from Ford steel to Ford plastics. You probably go to Chrysler steel. And so I didn't want to get pigeonholed in that space. And indirect, there's such a variety. So there's two things. There's such a variety of the areas of focus for indirect. And the other thing is there's such an impact on economic development because you're dealing with so many small businesses in that space. Direct, you're traveling across the world, you're finding these big suppliers. They got to be able to service you. They got to be able to have the infrastructure to get you what you need. And that's fine, that's fun. But indirect, you have so much impact on what's happening in the global economy as well, but more importantly, in the local economy. Small businesses, diverse businesses. You can go from marketing one day to IT the next day to facilities to construction and find out all of the common threads between them all. And in most situations, that's where your transformation is happening. And we look at, the last 10 years, but I think the next 20, 30 years, especially with this supply chain interruption, which has reset it. I think the supply chain interruption has reset direct as well, because people thought they had good sources. Now they challenge that. But on the indirect side, we're going to see for some years the ability to be able to transform that organization as people realize that, indirect is a large part of it's not our COGS, but it gets into our operating expenses, our SG&A. And we need leaders that can come in here and drive that number down so we can see more profitability. So that's the long answer.
What makes you so good at leading an indirect procurement team?
Am I good? I don't know. Is there a measure? Is there a report out that says I'm good? I think I do. I think I do fine. I think I do well. And I think it comes down to the ability to connect with the stakeholders. You have to come into their world, and not everyone can drop themselves into a new environment, a new world. In my case, 2 years ago, a new company all together and be able to learn the needs of those stakeholders and do it in a way in which is non-threatening. And so I'm not here to save you money and go back to finance and say how your budget needs to be smaller next year. I'm here to give you extended budget so you can do more of the things that you want to do. And so I think having those conversations and making those connections, but then also you learn something new in every space. I've never learned more about broadcasting than in the marketing space. From you, I've learned so much about print. Jeez, you show up with a newsprint outfit in a heartbeat. I'm like, can you do that? Like, how did you do that? We're like, it's so it's just, technology as well. So you learn so much in indirect and the ability to create centers of excellence that I think I do really well at. Think about the end in mind and helping our stakeholders get there.
Where do suppliers fit into the mix?
When I was in the home building industry, before I was in the home building industry, I didn't understand. But when I got to the home building industry, I was asked to lead up our procurement operations. I realized that 95% on average in the residential home building space is outsourced to contractors and suppliers. And only 5% is actually project managed by that company. And so as a buyer of a home, you may deal with the salesperson that works for that company. You may deal with the construction manager that works for that company. There's a good chance a lot of the other folks that you deal with, especially if they're working on your house, they're probably tradesmen. And so I look at that model, right? And I think about, regardless if it's home building or any other industry, you're only as good as your supply base. You're only as good as your supply base. So if you're a manufacturing company and you're doing $2 billion a year, there's a good chance you spend 1 to 1.2 billion on raw materials. You spend it on your facilities, on your equipment, capital, construction, and all of that's not happening in house. It's happening through your supply base. And so extremely critical for your supply base to complete that puzzle for you and help you deliver against your customer needs.
What advice would you give to people struggling to determine if they want to pursue a career path, more that's direct or indirect focused?
Yeah, I think the proof is in the planner. What are you talking about, G-Sean? When I decided that I wanted to get in procurement, I was interviewing with Motorola, and I forget his name. This is 19. Should I date myself, Sarah? Should I do this?
Go for it.
1998. 1998, I decided that I really like this procurement thing. I want to go for it. I'm interviewing with Motorola, and I said, "Do you mind?" And by the way, I gotta preface this. This is when we actually had planners, like the literal planner that you walk around with, the book you open it up and you write in.
You mean paper and pen?
Some people listening to this, okay, a pen this is a pen. All right. So I said, "Hey, look, do you mind if you can show me your planner from last week so I can see what your life is like?" And he had no problems. He opened up the planner and he said, "I was traveling here. I did a leadership report out here, and I was working with a supplier negotiating here, and then I had to make plans for this, and I got a chance to get a feel for, okay, perfect. I am not going to be sitting at a desk from 8 to 5." And that was it for me. And so I think when you look at direct versus indirect, you have to understand the nature of that category. On the direct side, it gets into excellence. It gets into certificate of compliance. Did we receive the right stuff at the right time for production to be able to live, for production to flow? And that may be a high impact environment. If you don't receive the right stuff at the right time, your life may be consumed for the next foreseeable future trying to get it right. On the indirect side, it was about, do we have the right infrastructure for production to happen? Do we have the right infrastructure for sales to happen? And so you can strategize a little bit more on the indirect side. That's what I learned, and maybe different, depending on the company that you're at. But you strategize a little bit more on more abstract. The direct is very direct. It's very concrete. We either have this cap for this bottle or we don't. Indirect is, I don't know. If we did marketing and branding and broadcasting in these 5 regions, would it return something? Possibly, maybe not. And so that's what you got to really understand the nature of direct versus indirect as you're making that decision.
One of the things that I think you excel most at, Deshaun, is building really good teams. And I would say the people that I know that have worked for you would describe you as the best or one of the best leaders that they've ever worked for.
Oh, wow. I'm gonna make sure I send that check.
What skills and personality traits do you look for when you're hiring people?
Okay, that's a good question. One of the, and this is kind of indirectly answering your question, but I'll make sure I get to it. One of the things that's important for me is to understand the thought process. And one of the questions that I ask, regardless of what's on paper, I need to know how many ways can you get home from work? And so if you work downtown and you live in the suburbs or vice versa, and maybe you live right across the street from your job, I still don't care. I want to know how many different ways can you get home. And one of my, I guess, pet peeves is that some people may say, I don't know. I take the same way every day. And I think in this industry, in procurement and supply chain, you never know when there's a pandemic. Before there's a pandemic, you say, there's no way there can be a pandemic. That's something that can impact this entire world. That's crazy. But then you go through it and realize that's not so crazy. We're still impacted 2 years later, 2.5 years later, 3 years later. And so you always have to expect the unexpected. And if I'm talking to someone and they've never thought that that road could have been shut down, or they never thought that their car wasn't going to work that day, I don't know, whatever it was, I want to make sure that at least it was a thought. I was impressed with someone one day. This is probably about 7 years ago. He went through so many different options. Like, okay, that's enough. I'm good. He had 7 different options for a 3-mile commute. And I was really impressed by that. And so I think, again, I want to, the skill set that I'm looking for is the ability to think in flight. Everyone can put down a checklist and say, okay, I have 12 steps of the RFQ process, and I'm going to go through each step. Hey, Chris, I'm going to go through each step, and I'm going to make sure that we do this and do that. But what happens when there's a detour? What happens when the supplier comes back and say, oh, we can no longer deliver that lead time anymore? What happens when the price goes up? And what happens when there's a pandemic? And I think that person that thinks outside of the box and are always ready for the detour does really well in this profession. And so that's definitely one of the skill sets that I'm looking for.
What about from a leadership perspective? What are you looking for when you're hiring people to manage teams or manage groups of people?
Someone mentioned the word entrepreneur. Is that what it is? Entrepreneur or something like that, right? I really like that concept. When I was at Intel, I knew that it was something bigger for me. And so what I learned was I paid to go to university, but then when I graduated, I got paid to learn. Like, wait, but it's not it. That's not it. You have to convert that into generational wealth. And a lot of us never make it to that third stage in this situation. So as a leader, I hold myself accountable for this and also my leaders. Your ability to look at not only the surface, not only the need of what's happening today, not only that PO or that contract that needs to be written today, but how do I consider this supplier in the next 5 years? How do I consider this relationship for the next 3 years? How do I ensure we mitigate risk over the next 18 months? And maybe that's not the question that your stakeholder even had. Your stakeholder just simply said, We need IT software. We need an ERP system. But no, not only do we need an ERP system, I need the leader that says we need an ERP system for XYZ today, but how is that going to be impacted with our growth 5 years from now? And so it goes back to our ability to be a businessman or a businesswoman first and be able to tie into profitability of our organization, to be able to tie into EBITDA of our organization and a strategic growth plan. Let's listen to the earning calls and see. Like we don't need to wait into our leadership. And you got me started, Sarah. We don't need to wait until our leadership team says, "Hey, can you do this?" Let's just listen to the earnings calls, understand what our organization is trying to do, and build our strategic sourcing plan based off of that. Because that's what they had to commit to. They had to go back to analysts and commit to that and show where they are in the status against the plan. And so we might as well help them out and do the same thing for our organization and tie our strategic imperatives and the strategic imperatives for our team to the strategic imperatives of our executives. So that's what I'm looking for in a director, in a leader of procurement, as a tall task, right? We're not wired that way usually. And it's something that I think we're continuously getting better at over the years as a profession.
What things should somebody look for in their vetting process of a company and leader? You multiple times today have said you turn down opportunities.
Yeah. See, I know how I'm wired, Sarah. I know that I am better served if you have $1.5 billion worth of spend and you have 7 people that report to you. I'm okay with taking half of that. Just allow me the freedom and the autonomy to do it in a way that I think makes best sense for that moment. I'm very low maintenance. I'll pull my bosses in, say, "Hey, look, I got a problem," but you're probably going to hear from me with a problem twice a year, maybe. Right? To the fact you may call me and say, "Hey, what's going on in your world?" Right? You're saving me money. You're implementing software systems. Stakeholders love you, but I don't know what's going on beyond that. Right? And I think what works for me is that my bosses over the years have realized if I don't want to deal with it, I'm giving it to you. Because I know that I can give it to you. You're not going to ask me 50 questions in order to get it done. And I want to go focus on something else. I want to grow the company in a different area. And so that's one of the things I look for in the interview is, whether or not my potential hiring manager could be a micromanager, whether or not they're going to give me that autonomy. And a lot of signs will tell you the answer to that. And, look, no one wants to sign up to put yourself in a failing situation. And so we have to be more cognizant of how we look at what a failing situation could be. And that's, I'm speaking for the small businesses as well, right? A small business, I learned when we were in private practice, never pick up a client that you can't have lunch with and enjoy it. If you painfully are sitting there saying, "I just can't wait for this lunch to be over. I had to smooth them because this is just what I have to do." But if you have clients that you love going to lunch with, you're like, "Oh, okay, it's 5 minutes left." You're like, "Oh, we got to talk about business. We got to talk about business." Then you're in a good spot because the quality of life of that relationship, it brings you life. And so I think the same thing with our day job, our W-2, or whatever we're doing to make a living. We gotta enjoy it. Look, this life is short, and we're gonna spend a third of it messing around with folks at work. Man, that's a lot of sacrifice. And most of us, not even a third. It's probably more like half of the day, right? Messing around with folks at work. And so I definitely interview the companies that I work for based off of the autonomy and ability to be me and to freestyle and to get stuff done. Hold me accountable for what I've accomplished, not for whether or not I got in at 8:03 one day versus 8:05.
We haven't talked much about technology. You've mentioned it a couple times. Where does technology fit into the mix of your strategy and what you're doing in the indirect space?
Oh, technology is the enabler of everything that you're trying to accomplish. And you can come up with a great business process and get everyone on board. But at the end of the day, they're going to go to some technology, some software to actually get it done. And if that technology is completely contrasting or conflicting with the business case or with the business process, it's not going to happen. And you're going to have one, you're not going to get early adoption for the next project. And then two, the utilization of that software is going to be lower, which means your compliance is lower, which means you're not able to track and reporting. And it has a whole trickle effect on how you run an organization, how you support the C-suite. And so it really is the enabler. It's the bloodstream, is the central nervous system of anything that you do. And that's, and regardless of the function, whether it's finance or supply chain, procurement, et cetera. Extremely critical.
What should people in supply chain, whether you're a buyer or whether you're a director, whether you're running a team, no matter where you are in your career, how can people get better at buying and implementing technology? I know it's a really important part, in particular on the indirect side.
That's funny. I had this conversation often. We have to go to the place of use. And so I'm going to tell you something really interesting. And I promise you, this comes back to your question. I'm in Houston, and they said, hey, the new Tesla is a relationship between Hertz and Tesla. And if you want to switch your car to a Tesla, all electric, feel free. I'm like, really? Let's go for it. And so I jump in. She gives me a little tutorial on how to work this thing, and I am off. I'm riding around town. I am getting stuff done. This is a perfect trip. Up until the point that I got to 9% on the battery.
I won't ask any more questions about that.
So long story short, at 1%, I pull into a buddy's garage at about 6 o'clock. And I'm like, I have no idea what to do. No idea what to do. And we play around with it. So I plug it into his outlet at 120 volt. And it says, okay, you now are charging your car like you're charging a cell phone. You have 24 hours before you're fully charged. I was like, I can't stay here for 24 hours. And so anyway, my point is you have to go to the point of use. And if I decide that I want to take a project that's sourcing all fleet, right, which is a project we're doing right now. We're looking at material handling equipment, and do we go from propane to electric? I have to put myself in the shoes of the stakeholder and say, if I have an electric forklift, how often am I disciplined enough to charge it? Because if I actually don't, I will be stuck in my buddy's house for the rest of the night. Okay, I'm sorry, backflash. If I actually don't charge it, I can't move product. If I can't move product, we don't make money. And so being able to see that trait that's so critical is being able to see what the end in mind looks like. All right, so with technology, I promise you I'll come back. If you don't see what you're trying to accomplish and how technology can help you get there, it's probably not going to work. I think there was I was reading, don't quote me on this one, Sarah, but I feel like it was 2005 or 6 or something like that. And there was a quote that 90% of Fortune 500 companies had some version of SAP. Right? I forget the exact numbers, but it was something crazy like that. But then when you talk to 90% of the companies who had SAP, they would tell you SAP sucks. All right, it's gotten a lot better. I'm sorry, any SAP people out there, I'm sorry. All right, but it's gotten a lot better. But that's the point. I don't think SAP actually sucked. I think it was the companies that didn't know what they were expecting. They couldn't think with the end in mind. They couldn't foresee what my business process needs to be 2 years from now. And said, that's fine. No, I don't want any customization. It's too expensive. Just give it to me out of the box. And that was the wrong decision for them. And hence the reason why their implementation wasn't as successful, or it was delayed for 6, 9, 12 months because they didn't think about those things in advance. You got me started. Sorry about that.
All right, so we're at our Spitfire round. I'm going to ask you 5 or 6 questions, and you're going to respond with the first word or phrase that comes to mind.
Oh, no, I'm going to get in trouble. Okay, all right.
Accomplishment you are most proud of?
I haven't done it yet.
Quality you admire most in yourself.
I was thinking about this. I'm always going to have your back. I am always going to give you a business case that is articulate and calculated and knowledgeable.
What's your dream?
I want to be the #1 advisor to someone. I was thinking about this. I got a chance to meet. Okay, this is too much. I'll make it quick. I got a chance to get a chance to hang out with the League of Mayors, which is all of the diverse mayors across the country. And as I was meeting all of them, I also got a chance to meet one of their #1 advisors. I was like, how sweet of a job is that? To be able to advise half of the mayors across the country on key topics. And so I think I would love to advise the president on procurement and supply chain issues in their presidency at some point in the future. Dream.
Biggest pet peeve?
People who give up too easily.
Favorite thing to do in your downtime?
It's a tie. Lay on the beach and just take video footage of the seagulls. That's one. And the other one is lay on the couch and watch Sunday football, but also nap through half of it. So between those two, there's some two-way tie. And I'm not sure which one. I'm thinking I'll take, actually, I just thought about this, Sarah. I'm going to take my phone to the beach, play with the seagulls, and watch football, and take a nap. Boom! That's it right there. That's my favorite. On the spot. It happened right here on the show.
What are you binging?
Oh, man. Nothing right now. Okay, so I used to binge Survivor and Big Brother, but I got really busy. And so I may have an announcement at some point in the next 30 days.
Favorite thing you've read this year?
My book. That's the favorite thing I read. Actually, I'm pretty serious. I try to read my book like every quarter or so. Here's the reason why. I was teaching a class of women business owners, and I said, "Give me your best negotiation quote." And one of the teams of 4 gave me a negotiation quote. And I said, "I really like that. I really like that." And they were like, "We hoped you would like it because it's yours." They took it out of my book. I said, no one's ever going to catch me off guard like that again. So I'm going to go with my book.
Deshaun, thanks for sharing your laughter and stories and just all of your wisdom with us today. For those that tune in every single month to our show, join us again September 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern for our next show.